Good morning. Let's start on time. How about that? Welcome to the largest gathering of nerds. This is like SummerCon, but Comic-Con, but for Pinwar. Thank you all for being here. I'm going to guess that the members of the panel know more about quantum computing than most of you, which is why we have gathered them here today, and a distinguished group indeed that we have. I'm going to apologize if I have not committed to complete and respectful memory the exact pronunciation. So after I mangle it, I'm going to get to first names, which I think I can handle. On my far left, Dr. Krishna Rupavatharam. Close. Director of the Spectrum Lab at Montana State University and a research professor in the physics department, heretofore called Krishna. Dr. in the middle, Nirav Desai is a global entrepreneur and investor and innovation strategist, and among other private sector leadership roles, he is the founder and CEO of Moonbeam. And to my immediate left is Dr. Sumner, Alperin-Lea. He is a scientist in residence for quantum algorithms at Quantum City at the University of Calgary. And joining us on screen, we are delighted, Anuja Kochar Singh, who is Vice President of Global Customer Service at IonQ. How about you all make them feel welcome? Let's table set. I'm going to make a heroic assumption that not everybody here has a degree in physics. So I'm going to ask Sumner to table set for us and explain what the heck it is we're talking about here, as though they all had degrees in English literature, for example. What is quantum computing? All right. Thank you. Push up.
There we go. Thank you, Governor Heck. So what is quantum computing? First, I'm going to assume we all know what computing is and focus on the quantum bit there. Quantum mechanics is the study broadly of things that are very small and very cold. And things that are very small and very cold exhibit unusual properties, ones that just don't resemble what we see at the scale of tables, planets, everyday objects. And quantum computing, in so many words, is computing that exploits those interesting phenomenon. The reason we care about that generally is that we have very good reason to believe that computation that exploits these phenomenon can solve certain problems that regular computers, classical computers we call them in the business, cannot effectively or efficiently solve. And a lot of those problems happen to be very commercially relevant across a wide number of key industries ranging from pharmaceuticals to logistics to finance. And so the focus on quantum computing largely is trying to find new ways to exploit quantum computers, a computer that makes special use of these interesting submicroscopic phenomenon to effectively solve important problems.
I don't know that it matters, but what do you mean? Subatomic particles. I mean, I'm 74 years old. I've just figured out classical computing. So on the subatomic stuff, how is it that they become so much more powerfully faster? How does that work?
There are a lot of...
And do not get into Schrodinger's cat. Do not get into it.
No cats involved. Got it, I promise. How about Schrodinger's canary?
No.
Okay, well, so much for that. How do they become more powerful? So it's about the specific phenomenon you can exploit. There's a few. We call one of them superposition, which is that and I won't mention certain animals, a physical system can occupy a mixture, we call it a superposition, of experimental outcomes, of states that are exclusive to each other, as long as you don't look at it. Before measurement, which is, in so many words, looking at it, it'll exist in a combination of states that can't happen both at the same time classically. So something could be simultaneously spinning to the left and spinning to the right until you look at it, and then with some probability, it'll either be spinning to the left or to the right.
Okay, I think that's enough of that. I really, thank you, Sumner. I really wanted you to take that next level down. Frankly, I knew it wasn't possible for mere mortals to understand this. But you stepped on the lead, which is, boy, if we can figure this out, we can do some amazing things that we cannot do now. Nirav, what's the current state of all of this? I mean, there's a lot of work going on out here, a lot of investment being made. Where are we? What can they do today? And blue sky it a little bit. Pick your number. 5-10 years from now, what are we talking about?
So we just did a market analysis for Washington State, and I'm no expert in the technology of quantum, but I do understand the economics. I kind of say we're at the age of PCs before or the age of computing before the PC. Quantum computers are valuable. They're starting to show that they can actually produce more work, better work in some scenarios faster than standard classical computers, but it's not everywhere yet. And there's about 200 algorithms that it can do, it works really well on. And so that means use cases like breaking cryptography. Not a great one, but it's going to happen. Our standard cryptographic algorithms, some say are compromised right now. If they're not compromised, they're on the brink of compromise. That means we have to think differently about how we encrypt data. And so people are working on new cryptographic methods. But beyond that, it's use cases like, basically use cases where simulation type use cases where you have to go down multiple paths simultaneously to get the optimal solution. Is that accurate? Is that a good overview of what it can be used for? I don't want to get the technical, so. Okay. Well, and so, sorry, and where it is right now, I would say there is still very much at the heavy government subsidized R&D side of it, but on the brink of commercialization. So there's kind of a race going on globally between China, the US, Japan, many others that are investing a lot because it's at the brink of being commercialized. And we know the values there. It's just, can we get the materials, materials in the quantum qubits, the quantum bits to scale at a large enough quantity that we could do real problems. And once we get that, they'll be very easy.
So, Krishna, before I get to you with a specific question about the forecast and our impediments,
Sure.
I want to go to Anuja because IonQ is maybe the biggest action in town as a company that's actually developing quantum computing. Anuja, can you talk a little bit about IonQ, where you're at and where you see the company being in 5 to 10 years?
Yeah, certainly. Thank you for having me. I'm the big head on the screen. It's always fun to be that person. I wanted to actually just elaborate on the answer that was just given before I jump into IonQ and our outlook is just the overall economic picture, which I think would just enhance the answer that was given. And the overall economic picture based on the latest report from McKinsey and I have the benefit of notes because I'm sitting in front of a monitor, is so the quantum monitor for 2026 shows that the extracted value created at an economic level by around 2035 is $1.3 to $2.7 billion a year. That's the yearly incremental GDP created. Last year, they had predicted 1 to 2. So what that tells us is that not only is the impact expected to be very large, but it's also growing in size. And if you think about AI, that impact is about, I think, around 4 trillion a year. The second really interesting point is that the number of jobs, according to the Quantum Insider, that quantum will create by 2035 is 840,000 jobs. Where IonQ's position and a lot of work that we do with universities and governments and creating quantum economies is that out of these 840,000, if the universities keep graduating and teaching students at the same pace, we'll probably have about 250. So there's a gap of about 600,000 jobs that may be vacant. And that's something that is the early mover advantage that IonQ has been capturing for the last 3 to 5 years. What we are doing here, and for those who are not familiar with IonQ, IonQ is a pure play quantum company. What that means is all we do is quantum. It's not an ancillary part of our business. I know a lot of the talk here is about quantum computing, but the progress is not just in compute, it's in quantum networking, security, software, AI integration, cloud accessibility. So what we are really working on doing is moving from isolated technical breakthroughs with use cases, but really around the integrated platforms that the customers can actually adopt. So we are at the brink of those commercial advantages that you were just speaking about. And what we are seeing is that you can today already adopt those portions of the platform, right? So you have the networking, you have the security, the sensing, and together that platform is what will enable the change of making usable applications with a very reduced time to solution, so that it's not just another way, but it's a better enhanced way to AI as well as classical computing.
Krishna, obviously, Anuja has made the case this is going to be big. Nirav says we're at the early stages.
Yep.
So from a science standpoint, what's standing between us and where we are today and being really big? What problems have to be solved for this to achieve what Anuja has laid out?
Yeah, great question. I think Anuja set it up perfectly. So there,
Krishna?
I'll start from a slightly earlier conversation. Instead of starting at quantum computing, there are a lot of quantum devices that we use that utilize quantum principles already. Laser is a good example. It's a quantum device, right? MRI machine works on quantum principles. So there are already applications of quantum mechanics that are around us. And computing is another example of employing quantum techniques to do powerful computing. So the quantum market is not just building a quantum computer, but building the subsystems, the devices, the components. A lot of those things have to develop first to be able to integrate it into a quantum computer that IonQ builds. So that is happening also as we speak. There are better lasers being built. There are better materials. There are cryogenics, really low temperatures where some of these quantum systems work. So the enabling technology, the support technology is also growing at a rapid pace. And that's the progress we see now, which allows us to now think about scaling these quantum computers into sizes that become relevant, that can actually show the advantage of using quantum techniques. Otherwise, they're competing with supercomputers, which are also growing. Simple electronics-based computers are also growing at a fairly rapid pace. So there is a critical point beyond which normal computers cannot compete with quantum computing systems. And that inflection point, I would say, as set by the recent policy from the White House, is about 2028 or so. That's when they want to see some real world applications that are enabled by truly quantum computing systems. So the progress in the answer in the supply chain, which is growing rapidly, I think that's what's happening. That's what's been happening recent times. Mind you, the scaling of quantum computers is a very expensive business, and by some rough count, every qubit, which is the fundamental computational element used by a quantum computer, to add that, it's roughly $250,000 or so. So that's a very expensive proposition. So till such the costs kind of if it's not brought down, then it's hard to imagine a single system growing large enough. So which goes to the second point that Anuja made, I think. So instead of building these large-scale quantum computers, it makes sense to build smaller ones, but connect a bunch of those through networks, just like our parallel computing systems work, supercomputers work, or data centers work. So that's the other progress that's being made. How to connect one quantum system to another one through a network. Could be a fiber, could be free space. So that enabling technology is growing at a rapid pace as well.
So I had the impression, maybe I was wrong, that we haven't solved all the science questions, all the technical problems to get us to this point where we have commercially applicable big problem solving capacity. And what I'm trying to get at or understand is what are the big problems that we have to solve in order to start in the development of quantum computing, in order to start solving a bunch of other problems.
Yeah. So I mentioned the word scaling, right? So it's scaling. How to grow this larger and larger computers is not a simple problem. For one of the fastest growing computing technologies, with all due respect to IonQ, is this superconducting qubit market that Rigetti, and there are lots of other companies that use just electronics. These are chips that sit at extremely low temperatures, and these are the fastest, and they are scalable. But each qubit takes about 5 to 6 cables to go into low temperatures. So imagine putting 200 qubits. They're like 1,000. It's literally called the wiring problem. They can't pack too much of cabling into an extremely low temperature environment. So there are companies that are now working on miniaturizing that. So scalability is a major issue. It's an engineering problem. There's of course, underlying physics problem as well. But that is, I think, a lot of companies are looking at how to scale these into larger systems.
If I could chime in just on that question around because we're at the early dawn, right? And let's go back to computing, classical computing. The first real use of the classical computer was code breaking, right? During World War II, Alan Turing built the modern computer around breaking Nazi codes. We're kind of able to do some of that right now with the quantum computer. So that's use case one, is working with cryptography. Beyond that, and the promise of quantum, which we're quite far from, is the idea of simulation. Right?
How far?
It's like in 1945, when Alan Turing was working on the architecture for a modern computer, it would be hard to come up and say there's going to be Facebook someday. So we're kind of at that point where it's hard to say what's going to happen. I will say the transition between, I would say about 3-4 years ago, we were at a phase similar to the ENIAC, right? At the early stage, and now we're at the PC, right? Because the progress is a lot faster because we know a lot more, and we have a lot of models from classical computing that we're applying. And so this idea of distributed qubits is much like the PC, and now you could do a lot more computing in a lot of different places and solve bigger problems. But it's very hard and highly speculative to say, oh, we'll be able to...
We're here to speculate.
Well, simulation is my speculation. I think a lot of simulation problems quantum has a promise of addressing.
Yeah, so I mean, sorry, Anuja.
No, go ahead.
What quantum computers were first put forward for was simulating quantum physics. That gets very relevant in chemistry. That gets very relevant in pharmaceuticals, in making batteries, where you just need to understand that physics, and trying to use a regular computer, you will run out of atoms on Earth before you can simulate hemoglobin or pick your favorite molecule at the level of accuracy that is meaningful and relevant. But a quantum computer naturally is suited to this problem. So when we talk about simulation, we're usually talking about the simulation of quantum physics itself on the quantum computer. And at the commercial level, that's usually going to be batteries in the pharmaceutical industry.
Anuja.
Thank you. We will not go into bits and bytes and speeds and feeds here, obviously, but I think there is a real practical answer to the roadmap that we are seeing, and I'll speak about IonQ here. You did mention about scaling, right? You're absolutely right. Cost and scaling has been one of the biggest challenges. And I do want to point out that with our latest acquisition of Oxford Ionics, we are moving away from lasers, which have typically been, the problem with error correction, with how you're actually going ahead and moving things around to more electronic controls. So what we are seeing here is that with the latest basically single chip scaling, our current roadmap allows us by 2030. So I'm putting a number out there, right? You're asked for dates and times. So we are projecting utility scale fault tolerant computing by 2030. The numbers are huge here of the logical qubits. And without going into technical details, what it comes down to is this concept of 2-qubit gates, and different modalities tackle it differently. And the really critical answer is time to solution. How fast, with high fidelity, low noise, can you get to the answer you want? So the beauty is that, and we will not go into details and comparisons here, but the beauty is there is absolute line of sight. We are already working on applications. We have proof points in real life, which are away from research papers. So I'm positively encouraged, and I've been at IonQ for over 3 years now, and we are we are at a point where we are seeing results. And to those who were mentioning simulation, we are also reaching that inflection point where you cannot simulate these problems, especially the nature ones. You're absolutely right? The nature simulated problems cannot be solved on a simulator anymore. So those are the inflection points where the hardware and the technology is reaching a point, and the barrier, which could have been broken by simulation earlier, is not possible now. So with those inflection points, we can all take heart in the fact that now the key barrier to commercial adoption is those critical use cases that everyone's working on to solve.
Lots of references to classical computers. I doubt there'd be anybody here that would argue with the assertion that the personal computer profoundly changed civilization. Is the same true of quantum computers? Is it just a matter of additional degree of computing power, or will it be civilization changing?
My answer is actually no. And I'll explain a little bit more about why. The PC was civilization changing because the PC is everywhere. Most of us have one on us right now. Secretly, almost all the electronics we have some kind of computer embedded in them, usually just a PC hooked up to a screen, televisions, cell phones. Plenty of people's refrigerator or automobile is just a PC attached to some other machine. You're not going to have a quantum computer in your cell phone. You're not going to have one in your house. You're not going to have one at your local library. You may not even have one at your local university necessarily. This quantum technology will fall in an area around supercompute use cases much of the time. So it'll make certain civilizationally relevant problems easier to solve, but on its own, it won't change how I think everyday life is conducted for just, the average person.
Nirav.
So putting on the speculative hat, I might counter that a little bit, because I don't think we know the applications completely yet. Consumer tasks are not even in the realm of consideration at the moment. But the same thing was said in the 50s when computers were room scale, that no one's going to have the PC on every desktop. No one's going to have a phone in their pocket. And a lot of that's driven by what are the consumer applications that will come from this being available. You're not going to have a quantum computer in your pocket, but you could be doing quantum computing jobs from a phone in your pocket that are solving a different type of algorithm. And that can be integrated into every application we work with.
Krishna.
So, yeah, I'll also differ a little bit. PC was a revolution. It changed our lives, but the ability to connect any computing device to any other, the internet, changed everything profoundly. And that's what is the potential that a network can unlock for quantum computing. I agree that quantum computers are not going to replace any of our personal computers. But the way it would work is that a quantum computer would work in conjunction with a classical computer. It's this hybrid computing model, which can run AI. It doesn't matter what you can think of. That being connected to every other quantum device out there is potential that we cannot even imagine what it will unlock. Just like internet changed lives. I mean, when it was invented, it was a simple connecting device or connecting platform. But you see how every aspect of life has changed after that.
Anuja, civilization changing or not?
So I believe in inspiration, and I completely agree with the right answer, with the last answer. I think the potential exists. We don't know it yet, and you will not use a quantum computer to do 2 + 2 = 4, right? It's great at certain things. It's not going to be great at everything. It's not going to be used for everything, but it will be working in this hybrid world. But there are civilization-changing use cases that, if we can crack, will absolutely be things that you will only be able to do with quantum, right? For example, rare diseases, the additional synthetic data generation for places where you don't have that additional data. So there are certain use cases where absolutely, if we get there, you would only be able to do it with a quantum computer. I also want to call out, we're talking a lot about quantum computing, right? But encryption, breaking encryption, that is, in our world, life-changing for us right now. So clearly there are certain things that you cannot ignore. And there's a potential of many other civilization things that we don't know yet.
So I'm probably the least knowledgeable person in this room about quantum computing. Probably. I know I'm the least knowledgeable person about quantum computing on this stage. My credential for conducting this interview is that I'm about a quarter or a third of the way into writing a novel, the plot premise of which revolves around quantum computing. You don't have to understand it to write that novel, by the way. But it has caused me to do quite a bit of lay research about the kinds of problems that could be attacked by quantum computing. One quantum physicist writes that fully developed quantum computers will be 1 trillion times faster than supercomputers at certain tasks. Whether it's 1 trillion or 1 billion or 100 million, hardly seems the point. So lots of problems out there to solve. I'm going to ask a difficult question. Please forgive me. Raise your hand if you've ever had a family member who's had cancer. Sumner, you want to revisit? It's not going to affect civilization.
Yes, and as a cancer survivor myself, I am prepared to speak to the matter.
Oh, good. Good.
You and me both, brother.
I'm staying with no. I'm staying with no because civilization change, those problems are social problems. For example, encryption. Fairly quantum-proof methods of encryption that can be done classically have been known since before I knew what a quantum computer was, probably before I owned my own computer. All of that research is old, at least in terms of the tech space, right? That a quantum computer's ability to break encryption was demonstrated in the early 90s. Methods for remediating that were already in place by the late 90s. Quantum computing only breaks encryption if the people doing encryption don't prepare, right? If everyone prepares for that, the threat is dissolved by socially implementing a way around it. Similarly, cancer. I think cancer gets spoken a lot with the phrase, the cure for cancer, which is a problem because cancer is not one disease. Cancer is a family of diseases, all of which operate on different ways. Many are capable of killing, but the way each one kills is not the way the others do. And accordingly, the cure for cancer doesn't exist because there isn't a cure for cancer. There's a cure for a kind of cancer in a given situation. Even though quantum may have a role to play here, and that's on the sort of drug development side of things, it's not actually solving the hardest and slowest part of that sub-problem. It's solving the part where we have sort of no idea where to start, but the slow thing in designing a new cancer drug is not coming up with candidate molecules. It's testing. That takes years. That can take decades. The part of that problem where the computer comes in is the part that takes hours to weeks. And so ultimately, solving any given type of cancer involves so many parts on top of the computational workflow that I think it would be irresponsible to make claims like quantum computing will solve cancer. Individuals will come up with specific cures for specific types one by one, and that may be tens of thousands of different drugs that need to be made and therapies that need to be developed. Quantum computing will play a role, but will not be the hero in that story.
Interesting. So with all of this, with all that we've said, long-term impact, big, cost, scaling up is what we're going through now. Limited focused problem-solving applications, which may or may not have profound impacts. That was a wonderful description, by the way, Sumner. Thank you. On all of us. Given all of that, I come from the public sector. Why should policymakers care? Why shouldn't this just be something that's out there happening organically? There's, some research investment at some universities, the private sector's standing up their different approaches. Why should policymakers, why should legislators care or be involved?
So I like to invoke historical examples, right? So let's go back to classical computing when it was born. It helped us win World War II. It's hard to deny the fact that our ability to break German codes helped us win that war. Which profoundly changed the history of civilization. We can speculate about what's going to happen 50 years from now or 10 years from now. Most of the encryption algorithms that are out right now are not quantum safe. Most of the way our data is protected is going to break. We need to be part of that solution, which is what is the next wave of securing data. that has profound geopolitical consequences for who comes up with that and who defends effectively. That's just step one. If we were to stop classical computing in 1947, yeah, we wouldn't have my cell phone. Everything that comes after that, but the value of the computer was achieved at that point. Everything that comes after that is the basis of the modern economy. So we don't know necessarily what is going to be the basis of the future economy, but we know that if we don't get quantum right, we're going to miss out on a huge opportunity.
I want to insert, because you brought up, what was the name of the computer in World War II?
ENIAC?
No, it had another
Oh,
name.
the Enigma was what we broke. That was a German that we broke.
Right. That was World War I.
World War I, yeah.
Yeah. So
Sorry, two.
Well, but
Two.
there was also, what I'm trying to say is, there was a coded letter sent from the Germans to Mexico seeking to ally in World War I, where that cryptography was broken also, which you could make a decent historical case turn the course of that war. Cryptography's played a pretty important role.
Cryptography has been a part of every war.
Yeah.
Simon Singh has a great book on that.
Yeah.
That's the Zimmerman telegram.
Zimmerman,
by the way.
yes. Thank you. I kept trying to think of that. That's amazing that you remember that. Okay, so they should care about it for these reasons. What should they do? Policy. We're back to the underlying question. What should policymakers do? Krishna, if you could cause the legislative assemblies of the provinces and the state legislatures and the federal government at both nations to take any action, what would it be?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, federal government, of course, have to invest. These are expensive. These are cost prohibitive enterprises. So the federal government has to put in some seed investments for a variety of reasons. I just want to go back to the application space a little bit. Why should we care? Healthcare, of course, is important. Drug discovery is an important thing, but I agree. Maybe there's no immediate solution that the quantum computers can provide with the limited computation capacity. But there are lots of other problems where traditional computing methods will fail. You cannot even attempt to solve some of the problems because of the complexity in computations. And that's where any speed up would help, and quantum computing can provide that speed up. Again, it's the hybrid approach. It's not by itself, but it'll, in conjunction with traditional models, is where it will work well. And connecting those, again, I go back to the example of internet. Nobody knew what the commerce-based internet was going to be, what potential it would unlock. And look where we are. It has changed lives profoundly, financially, economically, socially, culturally, everywhere. Quantum internet can be a catalyst of that sort. So governments will have to care. I'll just give one, coming from Montana, I'll give one example that one of our undergrads was looking at in terms of employing quantum computing methods. Montana is a big, large state, it's sparsely populated. So the problem posed was, if you want to connect these sparsely located communities with some kind of access, it could be fiber, it could be a road, some kind of connectivity, how would one go about solving the problem? It's a multi-dimensional problem. It's not just traveling salesmen. It's not how far apart they are. It's about how many people live, what kind of resources they have, what is their usage, what kind of infrastructure they have. So it's a multi-dimensional optimization problem. So there's no known solutions for that. And there's where you need quantum computing to enable a really good global solution. And that undergrad is actually coming up with some showing that there's a limited advantage of adding a quantum part to a traditional computing method, which is a small step but have a profound effect. So the state governments will have to be involved as well, because there might be problems that the communities can pose and then get solutions for. At least in Montana, our governor has initiated certain trade and technology missions. We were in the UK, we were in Japan and Korea, talking to folks that are investing in quantum there and seeing why that became necessary for them and how it could be adapted to a state like Montana. And we'll be going to India in October as well. Again, one part of the trip is talking to the Quantum Valley Corporation, which is a large federal investment in India. So there are well-known cases everywhere else where governments are actively involved, engaged in investments and developing a policy around it.
More money. Anything else?
If I can, oh, sorry.
Go ahead, Anuja.
Yeah, I was just going to talk about the two executive orders from the White House, which somebody referenced earlier. So, those are, again, focusing on quantum computing, but also on the post-quantum cryptography. And I think the main takeaway from there is the investments in research, talent, infrastructure, and commercialization, but also the preparing the digital systems for a future where quantum shapes the cybersecurity. And I think while a lot of the discussion is on computing, the executive order is placing really a near-term emphasis on sensing, quantum sensing, right? So these are tactical and economic utilities which directly affect defense readiness and aerospace and maritime resilience, where you could have GPS denied operations. So I think that the other thing geopolitically is supply chain interoperability. So policymakers should really have a step ahead in trying to figure out what are some of the core careabouts so you can get ahead of some of these things which are just happening globally.
I would say that different policymakers have rather different roles to play here and will benefit in different ways from the furthering of these technologies. So there's municipalities, there are provincial or state governments, and there are national governments. Municipalities, if they want to benefit from quantum, the most salient thing I think for them is to build and invest in the kind of infrastructure that is necessary for this project. Sort of like the selling picks to a gold rush approach to benefiting from quantum. Not saying that this is going to go the way a gold rush normally does. I have confidence that this technology will mature and create value. But for municipalities, at least on the computing side, benefit will largely come by investment in fabrication and research infrastructure. When you get to the level of provinces and states, you start to see where being the user of quantum computing has some direct benefits. For example, power grids and optimizing the power grid, which is recently gaining a lot more attention as an application, thanks in part to great work from Pacific Northwest National Laboratories. So go Penwar. And that's one of those problems where a slight improvement over current best classical methods, that might save you $1 billion on some time scale. So provinces can benefit both as users and as people who are on the supply side. When you get to the national level, that's where you're starting to really think about the longer shot stuff, the drug discovery, the energy applications, the geopolitical implications. But at all three levels, I think where government can contribute is that at the end of the day, we need to train people. We need to do fundamental engineering research that takes time, effort, and often repeating oneself. And we need things like fabrication facilities and clean rooms and all sort of manufacturing capacity that just, it ain't gonna build itself.
So I need to get to the questions that the audience members have submitted.
Sorry, may I just add, there is a real life example of exactly what you mentioned for the power grid with EPB and Chattanooga. So again, I'm just trying to bring it back to it's happening now. It's not, unreal dream world we are talking about. And that's exactly right. The benefits of quantum for the power grid optimization, and dynamic load balancing and predictive maintenance, etc.
I'll just add one more thing where standards is the main thing. There are no existing standards at the moment, and they are being developed, and that's where legislature can step in and put certain regulatory compliant procedures in place ahead of time.
Nirav, you look.
Sure. Funding, core research funding is great and it's essential. I think what's often overlooked is government's role in issuing a challenge and articulating problems that need to be solved. Putting on my former government consultant hat, modeling and simulation teams are only in certain industries in the consulting space, and simulation is going to become bigger. We're going to need people to run scenarios, and government's a great issuer of these challenges. We have to figure out how to manage air traffic. We need to figure out how to manage and simulate some of these very complex logistical problems that need new solutions. So let's challenge industry to use quantum methods to try to adopt them, address them.
All right, audience questions. What role do critical minerals play in advancing quantum computing, and where are we at in having access to enough of them in the US and Canada? Anyone?
It's a little difficult to answer in a blanket way because unlike modern classical compute, which is all follows a pretty standard procedure of manufacture and supply chain, different quantum modalities require different minerals entirely in many cases. So the niobium we need for the superconducting is very different from the ytterbium we need for trapped ions and neutral atom methods. So each modality has a different requirements that can be pretty substantially different given the distribution of various minerals across the planet.
And those aren't made up elements from Marvel universes, right?
No, those are on the periodic table.
No, rare earths. Yeah, rare earths is in general a class of materials that is critical for a variety of quantum applications, and that's a market controlled by China at the moment. And so, yeah.
Next question. Where do we stand in the race to win the quantum computing utilization? I'm not sure I completely understand what that question is, but I think they're asking for your opinion about where we are versus other nations.
I mean, in terms of timeline, I think 2028 is what the White House has set. But as Anuja said, they're looking at 2030. I think that's a more realistic expectation of seeing real-world applications of quantum computers.
When we break down between quantum sensing, quantum computing, and quantum communications, thank you. I would say different countries are leading in different spaces. I think China is quite far ahead in quantum communications. I think America focused more on quantum computing as its primary focus. And everyone's kind of working in quantum sensing to a certain degree, or a lot of people are working in quantum sensing to a certain degree. So I think we're far behind in quantum communications from China. Quantum computing, America and Canada are probably further ahead. I would say of the landscape analysis I've seen of what different countries are working on and what the quantum strategy is, I'm most impressed by by Japan and what they're doing in terms of mapping how quantum affects different industries and the rest of their industrial plan. And I think we have a lot to learn from how they've broken down the issue.
I was going to add on that. It's true that China has been leading quantum communications, but we just talked about, it might not be necessary for cryptographic standards to be quantum at all. So it's a race that probably there's no winner there at all. Quantum computing, of course, is a major application area and quantum sensing. I think Anuja mentioned that as well. So that's where the race is going to be. And I think US has got a good lead at the moment. Speaking of Japan, that's a good example where, again, going back to the federal investments, when we go to ACE, which is the equivalent of NIST in Japan, that's where they've put in $300 million, in fact, in one building, one lab, to build the most powerful computer they have. It's packed with multiple quantum computers, whatever you can think of are there. So that's the kind of information. It's not delocalized anymore. It's just a very concentrated, focused. They identified a thrust area and started putting in money. So that's how Japan is playing the game. United States has multiple interests and multiple centers of excellence, and so they're kind of seeding a variety of industry and academia to attempt multiple modalities, which is very different from how China and every other country is looking at.
Yeah, and I'll just add that the United States does have a lead in developer tools, right? Like Qiskit, Cirq, the algorithmic research that we're doing, cloud delivery. So I think we definitely have the lead there, but I agree with everything else on China's dominancy on infrastructure and communications and capital allocation.
And something that's a little bit different in the quantum compute history as compared to the classical compute is the extraordinary prominence here of private companies. The development of the computer from its early days as the ENIAC machine all the way up to the internet, that is government, that is military. It is basically untouched by private industry up until that point. Really until late 80s, early 90s, after 40 years or so as being an essentially government property. That is not the case in quantum computing, and it really hasn't been at any point the case in quantum computing. So the who's leading the race question is often framed more in what company is leading the race, what modality is leading the race, and that can, the degree to which any one nation is partnered with one of those companies who are leading the race, that's something that can be very variable. So some smaller countries that have fewer major corporate players have a much stronger integration of those corporate players with their governments in the forms of investments, in the forms of planning, etc. So Japan and England, or the UK, I should say, are both examples of this, where because of the strong integration, they come out stronger relatively in the race in comparison to their spend and their resources.
Great point. Fascinating. That's fascinating. On a personal note, I'm going to ask one of you to help me sleep better at night. When I was elected to the United States Congress in 2012, I was placed on the Financial Services Committee. And one of the first things I did was receive a briefing from a very large financial institution, which shall go unnamed, Bank of America, who told me, this is back in January, February of 2013, we're talking 13 years ago, they had at least a million hack attempts a day, which they were successfully defending against. I didn't know much about the financial services sector when I got there, but I was taken aback at that number, 1 million a day. So somebody assure me that if the bad actors get a hold of at some point in 5, 10, 15, 20 years, a quantum computer, they will not be able to successfully hack the financial services system of either of our respective countries, because frankly, I can't imagine anything that would be more suddenly recession-inducing than for that to occur. Oh my God, nobody's saying anything.
That threat is there. I mean, it's a possibility that powerful quantum computers can break the encryption methods that are being used currently. But if you're talking about 15, 20 years, it's hard to imagine what the prevalent encryption methods would be. Because one line of thought is that if you use quantum methods, not just for encryption, but for communication itself, you use these quantum bits to carry information, that is hack-proof. But whether we can do that at that rate, whether we can do that at a scale is very speculative. So there are ideas how to counter that kind of threat. But again, it's just a hypothetical game at this time.
I would say that this is in the hands of regulators in these institutions themselves. And if someone sort of, thumps the baton a little bit on this, sort of forces the hand of the financial sector, then the problem can be solved by those means. But if everyone sort of sits around and waits, you're going to get caught sleeping.
Or not, in my case, as a consequence of that conversation.
Sorry.
Cash under your mattresses. Sumner, I think this is a follow-up to something that you had said earlier. What is the pickaxe? You spoke about the opportunity for municipalities using the gold rush metaphor and suggested municipalities could provide some enablement, but what specific infrastructure? Cities don't typically build labs or research facilities.
They typically don't, but we're not talking about the typical case. In some cases, they do. I mean, Chicago has built the quantum and microelectronics park there, which is how they plan to be benefited by this industry in exactly the way I was describing. In addition to that sort of investment, but there's also things like efficient ways of shipping. We have something of a less currently operable rail network across North America. Even in comparison to the rail network we had 50 years ago, we've got less of it and in worse condition. Improving those kinds of logistical structures can be enabling. If it's easier and quicker to just get stuff to where it needs to be, that helps.
Question about energy consumption. What kind of energy consumers are quantum computers?
It depends on the modality. There are quantum computers that need extremely low temperatures. We are talking about almost just about absolute zero kind of computers. They need vacuum technology. They need cryogenics, right from closed water closed cycle chillers to other kinds of cryogenic engines. So they consume a lot of power. Then there are other modalities where they just use light particles to do the computing. It's just connecting to a wall plug, and it works. So there's a huge range of modalities. Of course, then IonQ probably has a very different power consumption plan there. Maybe Anuja can help.
Yeah, I think in general, without going into specific computations and what the classical bit switch and erase data is. But I mean, if you just compare it to AI, right, that would be a relevant one because everyone is doing AI right now. AI relies on thousands of GPUs and TPUs, and it's typically the AI data center would be gigawatt scale across the hyperscale data centers. And the quantum computing overall, if you look at the energy driver, the power draw of the quantum system is sort of decoupled from the computation itself. And exactly right, the trapped ion does not require that dilution refrigeration and the really super chill. So we are really just talking magnitudes of lesser energy consumption compared to traditional AI data centers. I'll leave it at that, and just in terms of magnitude and scale, and of course there'll be much more double clicking that has to go into it.
So the current policy area du jour in technology is AI. Just macro terms, what's the relationship, if any, between AI coming on and quantum computing? Again, in lay terms, these things related at all?
Less than I think a lot of people might suppose. The problems that in the quantum algorithms community we often hope quantum computing will be helpful in solving don't necessarily have constant overlap with the same things people want to do with AI. So AI is really good when you have a lot of data and you don't really know what's going on with it. You don't see some obvious structure in it, or can't easily articulate that structure. Quantum is often the most helpful in the precise opposite case, where data is sparse and structure is elaborate. So there's a separation for a lot of the problems that they are both counted on to solve. But that isn't to say there is no intersection. There are definitely application areas like anomaly detection for fraud in the financial sector, or even in the mining sector, where both modalities are interesting candidates for the same kinds of problems. So, there is a pretty healthy body of literature on quantum machine learning, and there's definitely an intersect case, but I would say that they are often said in the same breath with a degree of excitement that may not always be appropriate to the actual amount of involvement one has with the other.
Anybody have anything to add?
I think that was well put. Yeah.
I'll just add that. So you will not replace an AI workflow with a quantum workflow, right? There will be a portion of the AI workflow that you will feed into the quantum system, enhance it, massage it, and then feed it back into the AI workflow. So you're absolutely right? I mean, there's certain cases where there is some data to show that those enhancement works. So we have quantum fine-tuning for large language models. There is the quantum enhanced QGANs, right? Generative adversarial networks, especially for manufacturing and material sciences. So yeah, I mean, those are just the enhanced workflows over AI.
So, Nirav, we're a regional group here. This is 5 provinces, territories, and 5 states. And there's a lot going on here and there on quantum in locations throughout this region. Is there a way we should think about this regionally when we think about quantum?
Absolutely.
And what is that way?
So what's interesting about, well, there's a lot of, we'll say competing, but it's not, the centers are not competing. There's a lot of quantum clusters across the country and North America broadly. What's interesting, and they're all addressing slightly different problems. So I would say there's a lot of fundamental research going on. Chicago has really established itself as a center of excellence. Maryland, DC, Virginia is very much diving into cryptography and applications that related to that. Denver's doing their part around materials. What's interesting about the Northwest is if you combine the various regional economies, we have a really strong economic base to bring all of the different threads together that need to be brought together. We have our friends in Montana who are working on materials and a lot of other things. Portland has historical expertise in semiconductors and silicon manufacturing, which is going to be part of the equation. Seattle has this generational expertise in software platforms and enterprise platforms, which at some point in the near future, when we have sufficient hardware that's able, we're going to need a software API on top of that, a framework to run quantum algorithms on. And so that's going to need to step in. And then there's a lot of, D-Wave being a Canadian company. There's a lot of great research being done at UBC and Simon Fraser. So I think a lot of the economies can come together in a really meaningful way and address the various elements that it takes to make quantum actually become a powerful force in the economy.
Do they need to be doing something different than they are now? And if so, what is it?
I think collaborating,
Yeah.
specializing, understanding.
Yeah. Do they need to collaborate more?
Absolutely.
What does operationalize that? What does that look like?
Right now, we don't have a single front door entity that can help businesses that want to understand what quantum can do, map who they need to talk to about that. So businesses that really want to invest in, everyone's talking about the post-quantum encryption plan. How do I formulate that? There's not a place where a business knows where to go to address that question.
Do other regions have?
They do.
And
Chicago's got a front door.
And what is the front door?
The Hudson,
The microelectronics
Yeah,
park
thank you.
and the Chicago Quantum Exchange.
thank you.
Who funds it?
A mixture of private and public.
And
So it's upfront state and local money that led to a federal contract, a grant.
Krishna, you look like
Yeah.
you're trying to get in the auction.
I agree with about the identification of the strengths of the constituents of this region. For example, for us in Montana, we have had decades of expertise in 3 critical areas: photonics, lasers, essentially, materials, and cryogenics. And in materials, especially rare earth materials. And we've done a lot of work with that. And that's a very unique capability that allowed us to sort of demonstrate 2 different things. One, that we were able to build devices that could go into large scale systems that large scale quantum computer. We don't build quantum computers. We enable a lot of other support technology. The other thing we did was to develop a network. We're one of the few regions, clusters in the United States to build a quantum network. So that's a strength of ours, and that's built on decades of experience. I'm sure other regions have those unique strengths. So if one can identify, if there's a single entity that can identify these unique strengths and then bring them all together, then that will be a very powerful consortium to compete with any other cluster. Chicago, yes. Colorado also has its own hub called Elevate Quantum. But to me, there's a lack of cohesion there because they're so big, so diverse. There are a lot of competing forces. There is a unifying force that is missing, which I think these states can easily form, and that'll be a very powerful entity.
And when we say one voice or one front door, I don't mean that as a gatekeeper. I mean that very much as a catalyst.
Yep. As a unifying entity.
Yep.
Anuja, this begs a question, it seems to me, for you in particular. IonQ is a private for-profit company with a particular approach to a particular modality to scale up quantum computing. You are effectively, therefore, competing with other private enterprises for this space. So how do you view this issue of having the different legs of the stool, government, universities, private sectors, increasing their collaboration? At what point is it a question of you going, wait a minute, we're out here trying to win the race, not interested in sharing, participating in anything that enables somebody to better compete with me? Or conversely, do you see it as helping you in your race?
Yeah, I think it's the latter. There's right now it's a case of broader education, broader policy around quantum. What we have seen and we have I think a little bit of a head start in the commercial side of this with the quantum computers. People mentioned Maryland. I'd like to mention Tennessee as well, Chicago, Basel, like going out of America right now. But the reason we see these, what we call quantum economies, or the regional plays heading towards success and being successful already, is the collaboration between higher education, government, and private enterprises. And I think for our standpoint is right now it's the rising tide lifts all boats, right? We need broader education. We need more awareness. We need more literacy. We don't necessarily need to produce more physicists. We need people who understand what the applications are. We need more people to do research and practical use case analysis. We need, supply chain. We need startups. So I think that right now it's not more about competing. It's about education, right? Which modality wins, it's ultimately going to be the answer to what are the problems you're trying to solve. But I don't even think people are talking about what problems they're looking to solve right now. So that's our stance right now. It's to build the talent, to build the partnerships and the industry connections that transform that technology into economic value and funding sources.
So you've got a surprisingly large audience of people interested in quantum computing here today. Above and beyond the delightful nearly 90 minutes we will spend together, is there anything in particular that any of you would recommend to a layperson to read about quantum computing to serve any purpose, to better understand it, to understand its implications? Is there anything that you can recall that's been written that would be helpful to people that are interested? Again, above and beyond the conversation. Anybody? No. Yes.
Your book? your novel?
Means I have to finish it, Nirav. Sumner.
They did write Quantum Computing for Dummies, but unfortunately, my sources who have read it said they found it hard to understand.
If there's math nerds in the room, and there's a amazing person on my team, and he's written a book which is Essential Mathematics for Quantum Computing. So it's really a beginner's guide, but it's the math which leads you to that. It's basically linear algebra in different ways that you calculate.
What's its title?
Essential Mathematics for Quantum Computing. His name is Leonard Woody. So I'll tell him.
Last name,
Woody. First name is Leonard.
Oh boy, a book about both quantum computing and math.
So
Nirav.
I'm going to go a little bit further and not suggest a book not about quantum, but it sets the foundation for understanding cryptography, which is going to be the first real application of quantum. And that's Simon Singh's The Code, which gives the great history of cryptography and how every generation, or there's this tug of war between people who can encrypt and people who can break the algorithms. And we're at that inflection point right now where that shift is going to happen, and because of quantum computing. So I think it sets the stage well.
Again, the book?
Called The Code by Simon Singh.
Krishna?
Those are all great recommendations. In fact, there is also a series of not dummies, there was Quantum Something or the Other for Babies books, which I was told that they're actually not a bad introduction to anything quantum. So Quantum Entangled for Babies is something that we have given out to during our open house. There is a lot of literature coming out of MIT, for example. These are open both videos and lectures that you can see, very well presented at from layman perspective, starting with no assumptions of knowing anything about math, but building up gradually to explain how quantum computers work. There's, I think QERA actually released a book about two characters, two girls. I don't know whether anyone has seen this. I might have it in my. QERA has the book with two young women researchers discussing quantum computing, what it is and what it is not. And it's also very well written. I forget now what the book is called. I might have a copy here with me. So yeah, there's a lot of literature available, and if, for free.
Yes, Shane.
And I love what you're saying, but the answers come from the politician and the guy who doesn't know anything about quantum as a translator. I'm going to hack the guy's last name. He's a Japanese physicist. He's out of the U.S.
Keku.
Yeah.
Quantum supremacy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Great book.
Thank you. You're not being picked up on the mic, but actually, Shane, I was literally about to say, have any of you read Quantum Supremacy? Have any of you read Quantum Supremacy? And if so, Krishna, do you think for the layperson that would be helpful? Look, I'm a layperson. Shane's a layperson. I've read it. Actually, I've read it twice. The first time I read it in a weekend because I found it very compelling. You too, Shane? Yeah.
Yeah, no, they're all great books. Yeah, absolutely. And he's a great speaker as well. He's got a bunch of videos on YouTube. In fact, he's
a great translator.
Yeah.
It's Dr. Keku, right?
Explains what he writes.
New York University. Yeah. We're near the end here. Yes.
And you can see the business use cases and the business perspectives of what's coming up on the industry that might be more relatable to.
So again, you're not on the mic. LinkedIn, go to Quantum Insider. This is for the layperson on account of the title is Quantum Insider.
It's like a pun on Business Insider.
Okay. Quantum Insider. We're near the end, and what I always like to do is leave enough time for everybody to add something that hasn't been brought up in the conversation or kind of reiterate that which they think is particularly important to reemphasize. Anuja, I want to start with you. Is there anything that you want to underscore or anything you want to add that our conversation has not led us to discussing?
I think I just want to encourage people to think beyond, hey, is my region going to own a quantum computer, versus is your region creating the conditions for quantum innovation and adoption to flourish? And that's going to be through making strategic investments in perhaps shared quantum infrastructure, in the learning, education, training. I can't underscore that enough, like building talent, getting ahead of the curve there and finding the ways to build that talent is really going to be important. As well as, as I said, it doesn't just have to be producing more physicists, right? Evaluate quantum adjacent fields, like speak to the computer science people, speak to people working in the power grids, and try to identify what those use cases might be. I think many of you know that I'm stepping in for Lisa. She did want me to point out that for those in Canada, CMC Microsystems is launching the next call for applications for Canada's Quantum Computing Sandbox this August. So you can go to fabricinnovation.ca. So I'm just putting that out there for people who want to get their, dip their toes in it.
So tend to the whole ecosystem. Krishna.
Yeah, thanks for this opportunity. I'll go back to workforce development that I didn't get a chance to talk about, coming from the university. And we do this at 4 different levels, K through 10, where we either reach out to them or bring their teachers to our facilities where we do have quantum computers, raise awareness, remove barriers so that they can go back and teach those kids, and then finally bring them during summer for a summer camp to work with these quantum systems hands-on. The 11th and 12th, we do offer internships so that they can come and spend their summers with us working on really advanced problems. Then there's a 2-year and 4-year degree programs at Montana State University that has optics, photonics, quantum technicians, integrated photonics, a variety of subjects that are either directly or indirectly connected with a quantum ecosystem. And then we have a master's in optics and photonics that draws from multiple disciplines, engineering, chemistry, physics, etc. So we're doing a lot to sort of, again, raise awareness and then build that workforce and fill that gap that Anuja talked about. The last thing I would say is that we actually have a very active interdisciplinary program that connects art with quantum. We have a resident artist at QCore, one of the centers I'm CTO of, who hears about all things quantum entanglement or superposition, all this Schrodinger cat, and then he goes and expresses through art. And so his artwork is actually a very popular exhibit, which is a fantastic conversation starter. Everyone gets attracted to it. Then he initiates the conversation, then we will take over. So yeah, there are multiple ways of raising the awareness on all things quantum and removing fears, especially. So we do also have a program where we're inviting parents now, because that's where the fear starts. So educating parents about all things quantum, and that's how we work with the community as well.
So education and talent development, think three-dimensionally and think start early.
Yep.
Nirav.
So I kind of like to address that with why I'm excited about quantum computing. And it goes back to how we address business problems and what our tools are. In general, you could sum up business problem solving by doing research, making an educated decision, and measuring the outcome. Great. That's the way most business problems are solved. And we have a number of tools, from computers to big data to crowdsourcing information, that have helped throughout history make decisions better and measure results. What I'd love is the concept of now we're approaching an age where we could add simulation to that process. We could do analysis, collect research, do analysis, make a decision, but before we make a decision, maybe go run some simulations. And quantum allows the ability, and it's not quite there yet, quantum with AI synthetic data generation creates an ability for us to run simulations before we make a decision. And we have only been able to do that in limited domains in the past, but I'm hoping that the technology will allow us to do that in a lot more domains and fundamentally change the way we make business decisions.
Powerful, powerful problem-solving tool. Batting cleanup. Bases loaded, bottom of the ninth. We're down by 3. Sumner.
2 strikes.
Watch what it can do in the energy space. Just because it probably won't solve cancer doesn't mean it can't solve clean energy storage, better batteries, making a fully renewable or mixed renewable nuclear power system possible, efficacious, and cheaper. That, I think, might be one of its most life-changing and far-reaching impacts, is quantum in the energy space.
Energy. Wow. Anuja, Krishna, Nirav, Sumner, you've done an incredibly good job with an incredibly difficult subject and an incredibly underqualified moderator to walk you through all of this. And you've had an incredibly gracious audience who are now going to demonstrate their graciousness by expressing their appreciation.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having us.